Hey people, thank you for tuning in and for stopping by for our review of Annihilation. This is going to be both the spoiler and the non-spoiler together. I felt kind of disjointed to talk about this one in two separate pieces, so we're going to put all that in one pot. This is Ian here, along with Isaac.
What's up, guys?
Hey, thank you for joining. As you know, normally Chris and I are sitting down doing reviews. We had a super busy weekend full of movies. Chris actually went to check out Game Night. That review is going to be up on this channel, so if you want to hear thoughts on that, if you want to hear some of the reception acclaim, all that good stuff, please check that out. That'll be right here in our other videos for you to check, as well as our other episodes. Had a bit of a hiccup with our weekly episode for general news about other movies and things coming out, and gaming, of course. Audio issues, you know how that goes sometimes. But we're going to be picking that back up again next week. But stay tuned for much more besides our reviews. We'll also be having our content for Road to Infinity War and a whole lot more coming at you. But that is all to come. I'm looking right now at Annihilation, or well, may not be looking at anything if it was all annihilated. But we're gonna we're gonna talk about that as we jump into it. So. This is a film that's based off a trilogy of books. Now, I didn't read any of these books coming into this movie. I don't think you did either, right, Isaac?
No, like I said, I did the Wikipedia and the SparkNotes version.
Quick summary and stuff. Yeah, there's some good key distinctions here. There was a very close work relationship here between the director Alex Garland, also between the novel itself, Jeff Vandermeer's work. The interesting thing here, I think, what the silver screen has done is given this a chance to have more clarity, even down to the characters that would in the novel. Now, you made a really important distinction. I know we were chatting about this a little bit before the show, that in the books it's kind of unclear. It's a little bit nebulous.
Yes, the author said he really wanted to keep both the ethnicity and the gender of all characters kind of ambiguous,
right. So
that way you could really use your own imagination to kind of come up with the concept.
Right.
Off
the cuff. Have you read something like that? Or how effective do you think that is, not being able to visualize your protagonist?
I think there's good and then there's bad to it.
Yeah.
I know, like, if you want to go back real literary greats, guys like J.R.R. Tolkien were all about the smallest, minute detail. They
right.
would write about it. While C.S. Lewis really stressed in all of his novels that it's important for the imagination to come up with it, simply so that you can add more of your own experience into the book. So I feel like that's what this author with Annihilation was trying to do. He wanted people to put their own experiences in it and not
right.
Struggle to get over somebody else's interpretation, and I think he did a great job. So
cool. Yeah, I know a couple of my literary favorites. V.S. Naipaul, for one, he writes a lot of works about cultural identity. He has very sort of broad-stroked, general definitions of his characters. You're sort of free to fill in, but I think that works because of the way he sets up the world and everything, as opposed to Barbara Kingsolver. She did Poisonwood Bible and a few other works like that. She is pretty deliberate with her descriptions, but she does so within a pretty set archetype. She bases her characters more off, it feels like they're birthed more from that situation, more from that society and the world itself, than vice versa affecting it. So there's a ton of ways to do this. I think we see in books. I think it is a double-edged. Just speaking myself, show me who I'm dealing with. I like to know my characters. Give me
absolutely.
give me some ground. You know, I get really earthy with that kind of stuff. But that's I guess that's just me. So cool.
Something kind of keeping on the author point. Apparently, the author really loved this interpretation, which it seems to be, at least in my experience, I've noticed a lot of authors really hate the way their book was interpreted.
Right.
But the director and the author worked really close together, and the author ended up going on the record saying that he called it beautiful, horrific, and a surreal experience.
Now that's rare, because most of the time, most of the especially the novel to big screen translations I see, the author bugs out about something. or wishes something could have been done better. Say, that's not quite accurate, or even from a fan viewpoint. I mean, if I had a penny for how many times I've heard people say, but the books were better.
Yeah,
that was better than wow, that's rare.
So, congratulations, guys! Like, you did it.
Yeah. No, good stuff. Good stuff. Now, also, as we're talking about characters, now this cuts down to the casting a bit, and there was a little bit of controversy here. When it came to some of the casting. I think you had a couple of good points about as we talk about this sort of fluid character that we're free to interpret, and how Natalie Portman fit into that, or how some people felt she didn't fit into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was actually two major controversies coming into this film that really centered around Natalie Portman, probably best known for her roles in the Star Wars films.
Oh, yeah.
So there was, the first controversy was a lot of people felt that Hollywood had whitewashed her character. Now, in the book, as we stated before, the author was really ambiguous about what the character looked like, but he did describe Natalie Portman's character as having dark, thick eyebrows, an off-center nose from an accident, and high cheekbones that spoke to a strong Asian heritage on one side of her family.
Right.
So, if you can either say that they should have cast an Asian character, or that also really describes Natalie Portman as well. And we're not really sure like how much of an uproar really was. 10 people on Twitter can be an uproar, and enough people retweet it. And this, I think this film did do a great job of plenty of diversity, as we saw in their casting, and it was a pretty strong female-led film as well.
Definitely.
And so I feel like that controversy might not have been as big of a deal. One that was a bigger deal to a lot of people, though, was something that had to do with Roman Polanski and the Me Too movement. Now, for those, I mean, unless you lived under a rock for the past couple months, the Me Too movement was a movement that started ironically after Hugh Hefner died, and it really highlighted sexual harassment and assault.
Right.
And it kind of brought to the surface things you've known about Hollywood for decades. And Natalie Portman's been a huge supporter of this movement. And she's gone on the record, talked about how she was harassed by producers and just as a model and all these other things she's done. Well, in 2009, she signed a petition that she said was one of the stupidest things she's ever done. Said that it was a mistake, that someone had just handed her a binder, asked her to fill it out, and so she just did it, said sure. Well, what she didn't realize what she was signing was a form that was asking charges to be lifted off of Roman Polanski. Now, who that is, he's a French-Polish director. He directed the Macbeth film that starred Mel Gibson.
I remember that.
He directed The Pianist, and he directed The Ninth Gate. Now, I find it very interesting who signed this document. Those that signed included guys like Woody Allen, Harvey Weinstein, Del Toro, Tilda Swinton, and Darren Aronofsky. I just find it very interesting that guys like Woody Allen, Harvey Weinstein, people we've known have been sexually harassing people, or passing around this document asking people to sign it to basically lift charges. And unfortunately, Portman was one of the ones that signed it as well.
Right.
Is it really a big deal? I mean, it's kind of open to the audience member. Some people felt like she shouldn't have been cast in this female-led film because of it. But at the end of the day, the director said, you know what, she fits my vision for this character, and we're going to go with it anyway. And I would say by the numbers, it doesn't seem to have hurt the film too much.
No, and that seems like I think a much lesser roundabout matter, I think, than the first you mentioned, which is that complaint about lack of diversity. I completely disagree with that for this film. I think that there are really no issues with that. That's established up front. Not only with the all-female survey team and the pretty awesome professions they all have. We got a biologist, a physicist involved, psychologist, a medic, a lot of advanced fields. But even besides that, down to where they're from, they're from many different areas of the U.S. I think in terms of our medic, she mentioned she's from Chicago. And things like that, but diversity is not something that falls on its face. I think between this group, I don't think there's anything, no love lost there, and I really didn't feel that we lost something. I don't feel that we had an erosion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt overall they did a great job, and everything in these controversies were just minor road bumps, if you will. So,
Right, right.
but important points to bring up.
Yeah.
So a lot of people did. Again, had a Twitter outrage, which could have been 100 to 1,000,000 to 10 people. So
Right. So, cool. As we start to jump into, looking at, I mean, what this was all about, looking at where we're based here, just to give people some clarity. I believe in the books this was called Area X. The basic concept is there is this massive area, sort of like an oil bubble, and it's been in a constant state of expansion. The opening of the film brings us into a scene of meteorite impacting a lighthouse. This is where the phenomenon started. The field started expanding, and it has steadily been warping anything caught in this zone. Time seems to have at least perception of time seems to have a different movement in here. It's had really adverse effects on all biological life. It's touched down to plants, whoever's entered. Eventually, a survey team a couple of teams are established to go check this out, to investigate it. Nothing ever comes back. Everything they send in, from soldiers to troops to even animals to test out, nothing returns. And this is something that the film establishes. It's been managed to be kept in secrecy. It's been kept under wraps. They've evacuated any nearby populations, but soon it's going to be too much of a problem to ignore. They are not going to be able to hide this from the world, and it's got to be solved, and the source of this has to be found. So that brings us into really the start of our film. Natalie Portman plays Lena, who's certainly our lead here. She is, we're led to believe she's widowed right off the bat here. Her husband, Kane, is a military special ops, and he's goes on a mission. He can't tell her where beforehand. And here's the one thing I like how this whole thing's built and constructed. I really felt like I was watching a book coming to this. Yeah. It's very much divided into chapters. If anything, you have the opening to establish, and then later on you have the next part of it called just the Area X, and then later on Lighthouse and everything like that. So it's very sequential. There's a bit of jumping around through time to kind of base the narration of what happened, what are the states of events and everything like that. But we're pretty quickly brought to a scene of Lena grieving over Kane, her husband, realizing that he might not come back. He hasn't been heard from, hasn't been seen from, nothing. And she's painting the bedroom in their home, not really too sure how she's going to go on from here. And lo and behold, Kane shows up, just walks right in the door. Of course, she's absolutely floored, but something isn't right. He's almost catatonic, sort of just ambling around and everything, and he soon gets really, really sick, deathly ill, starts hemorrhaging, organ damage, and she soon finds herself in a super lockdown facility, military facility, and this is where things really go from here for her joining the survey team. And honestly, as far as our premise, the kickoff, where we're led here, this clips along pretty quick. I didn't feel, at least, that we get bored being left in the dark super long or
as far as films go, this was almost a short movie.
Yeah.
Especially like with these 3-hour marathons that have been going on. I mean, this only ran about 115 minutes, I think.
Yeah. What was I could have sworn this one was 2 hours. I'll know in just a second.
Yeah.
It turns out, because I remember looking at this when I was trying to find out the showings on Friday. Yeah, it's actually 2 hours. It sure doesn't feel like it.
Okay. Yeah, the pacing's very quick.
Yeah, I agree with you. It felt more like an hour 15, maybe even if that. So, but yeah, we're pulled in pretty quick to the actual phenomenon itself. Natalie Portman's character, Lena, again, we're seeing most of this from her perspective as they go in and examine this. As far as survey missions, now the last time I remember a sort of alien-ish survey mission was the last Alien movie I saw, which Chris and I even as Alien fans, we weren't super into.
Really?
Part of that was because of just how awkward the survey process itself felt. You had people walking around taking a whiz on a foreign planet, just poking things, and it turned into a mess just quick.
I agree with that. Was that translation film, the one about the language?
Yeah.
There was that one not long ago either.
Right.
I didn't check it out, but I heard things.
Yeah, how did this one as far as the team itself, were there any did you have any just slap your head moments like come on, or
no? Actually, I felt like their casting was right on point, and a lot of these characters were developed very well. I didn't feel like they were generic. Like you have the Fast and Furious, and actually they even make fun of it. I think in the 7th one, they're like, that's alpha male, that's alpha female, that's the jokester, that's the they didn't. I felt like they really did a good job of avoiding. Every one of these guys had their own personalities. They weren't just the straight and the gag. It was everyone had their own moments.
Yeah, I'll level with you here. One of my pet peeves I've always had with this concept of survey teams and everything is when you have a crazy amount of infighting that happens, especially on like a foreign planet. I never understood that. It's like you're all out there struggling for your lives and you're going to get involved in some drama. Whereas here, I didn't expect myself to back off and give this a little more leeway, but in this context, the inner conflicts made more sense because the longer you stayed in this zone, the more your mind unraveled.
Yes.
And it had different effects on everyone because of actually a really cool premise. That the idea of this zone that they're in is when you step inside it, it's like a prism. It refracts everything. That DNA.
And
yeah, you name it to the point where it's almost like an endless replication process. So you have this crazy place where stuff that just shouldn't happen biologically happens. There's a really early attack by an alligator that, if I heard that right, it's almost like crossed with like a great white shark.
Yeah, like it had the teeth of a great white, I think.
Yeah, and it
had the guy too that they cut him open and his guts were moving.
Oh yeah. If you're for the faint of heart with that scene will get you. But yeah, like we were saying, from the crazy cross species of the albino alligator to just seeing how badly this area affected everybody that came into it. One of the cool things here, we get breadcrumbs from the other teams. The electronic devices still work. They find memory cards. They recover camera data and stuff. And Lena decides not to tell anyone on her team except the psychologist who recommends organizing the mission in the first place that Kane was her husband, one of the last people that went on this mission. She just simply gives a story, hey, he was killed in action, and she grapples with this. She's struggling with this. She finds this footage of him cutting someone in his squad open and seeing his insides have basically mutated into what look like eels.
Yeah.
Almost, and it's just absolutely crazy. And in fact, I think later on that same soldier, like it seemed to meld with the wall and just grow indefinitely. Like it was like these huge mole growths, and it was crazy. So in terms of that, and I'm glad that the trailers for this didn't give that aspect away. Chris and I talk about this all the time lately, that a lot of movies are kind of shooting themselves in the foot up front because we know so much about it coming in. Even though we knew about some of the threats to this, I love how we didn't know the reason why, and I thought we got that well.
Yes, yeah. It's actually, I was looking at some of the quotes because I'm a big quote guy. I want to know what people are saying about this film.
Yeah.
And there's the generic, like, most magnificent film of the year, the brilliant, and there was one on the YouTube trailer one. It said looks like a horror movie version of Avatar, and I lost it. I thought that was so funny, and and I thought they did a great job of not giving away what it looks. Because honestly, that's kind of what for me when I watched the trailer. I was like, oh, it looks like Avatar, but crazy. And going in, I was like, whoa, this is not a happy film at all.
No.
So
not at all. And I think that part of it makes it so compelling are the design aspects here. And something like this is challenging. I imagine, especially with the sort of like a sci-fi thriller, you want to show audiences something that hasn't quite been done before, or at least in a really unique way. And I mean, we've covered so much ground today. That's really hard to do. Garland's had a number of interviews with just all kinds of different outlets, articles and whatnot. I think talking about this, I think both the difficulties and frustrations, but the successes, being able to do that, and just some of the things. The imagery here is pretty arresting. There's some pretty haunting things. You know, we were just talking about the soldier with his insides that were becoming warped. Another thing when I thought was really well set up and I found disturbing were the vines in the plant life that was growing in the form of humans.
Yeah. And
it was a result of really copying the basic layout of the human form, because this refraction issue that keeps happening, this replication. And about midway through the film, they come upon a safe house of sorts, but there are a ton of figures that are basically like vine growths, like in human form. You know, that's something that can look really corny, I think, if done badly. In the same hand, it's I think hard to make something like that look unnatural and natural at once. But I liked it. It was spooky almost. I for some reason my mind went to like a Hiroshima. You know, like the almost like some catastrophic event, and that's the last thing you had standing. But it was really spooky. I wondered, you know, is that just pure growth? Was that, you know, people that were actually here that just mutated into that?
Yeah,
could have happened.
Like, that was freaky, man. Like, I agree with you. Like, because that could have been super cheesy, or it could have been, I don't know. There's a lot of ways that could have went, but they did it fantastic.
Now, one I am surprised about. One I am very surprised that this didn't go differently was as we get about 3/4 of the way through I'm just going to nickname, I'll call it the bear attack.
Yeah.
Now,
it actually has a name, actually.
What is it?
So, because one of the guys he worked on Paddington, so they named it Homerdin.
Homerdin
is its actual name.
You know, I'm not going to be able to separate that thing from like Homer Simpson eating donuts now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what you just did. That's messing me up, man. Just saying. But oh man, I mean, we'll Homer the bear here. They're on they take turns doing sentry duty, guarding at night, and the survey team leader, Centris, the psychologist, she's on the ground, and she has a lantern, like a lamp on reading. I was thinking about that. I said, you know, this place is so weird. I'm really surprised they aren't all at high ground. You know, B, she can be attacked from any direction. Out there, pitch black at night with just that, that was for the one thing as far as the exploratory part. Like, I instantly questioned that.
That was probably the one illogical decision. Because for the most part, I think they made the right decisions.
Right.
But that was one that I was like, "What are you doing?"
and they paid for it pretty quick. You know, Lena. Lena comes out to relieve the post, and sure enough, they get this attack. It just basically just pulls one of them off and right through the fence, and there they go, lost a squad member. So, and
then I thought it was really something cool with the bear though. Was the whole using the DNA from Shepard?
Yeah.
To use the scream, that was freaky.
And here's the one I'm getting to. That is hands down the creepiest moment of the movie, and I think probably the creepiest mutation that we see later on. One of the team members, the medic, she starts losing her mind. She ends up attacking Lena. She finds out the truth that Lena's husband was on the mission previously, that she hadn't come clean with that. Ends up, tying the squad down in a chair. Most of the time, I'd be raging at this point in a movie, but I get it. It's the madness that starts to set in about this place. But Homer the bear decides to interrupt this, and there is this absolutely just terrifying looking mutation here. It's missing the majority of its face, but its roar is the sound of their last squad member who died. Like, it's just this wailing cry, agony. almost mixed with like a guttural like roar. That was expertly done. That was freaky as I don't know what. It built up a lot of dread in the scene. I thought that was probably the best horror moment. Of course, the team didn't get out of this unscathed. They managed to take it out, but they lose another member. It rocked, and we see a snip of this during the trailers, and I loved it because I thought we got just enough of it in the trailer. You could sort of make out maybe part of the muzzle, but you didn't get anything else about the scene. So that's good. I'm glad that ace in the hole wasn't, ditched and given away that quick.
Yeah.
So.
But then going back, yeah, like with the trailer, like if they would have gave that away, it would have made it really stupid. But that was cool.
Yeah. So absolutely freaky. Go ahead.
So kind of going back to that whole like humans being vines, like because that happened to Josie, right?
It did. The physicist. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't want to go on anymore, and I almost wonder, like, is that what happened to everyone that doesn't want to go on anymore? They just become.
Yeah, and it's interesting again how these mutations start to manifest themselves differently than everyone else. And I think she has a really good quote. She has a good comment in that. She just says to Lena, as Josie herself, she starts to notice basically plants growing out of her arms. She's mutating in real time. She basically says, "Look, you want to fight against this. Centrist wants to explore this thing and see it through to the end." She's like, me, I don't think I care about any of that. And she just sort of comes to a point where she just accepts what's happening. She sort of resigns herself to it, and Lena tries to follow her into when she slips off into the vegetation, but the idea is she just sort of becomes added to the scenery, these vine growths, these human-like vine growths, and she just fully falls into that form.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. I think out of everyone in the group, she sort of, I felt she broke early on. She was one of the first members to get attacked, an alligator attack anyway.
Yeah.
And that seemed to rattle her the rest of the film. She did her job. She stayed with her group. She didn't, go off and do anything else crazy, but she wasn't the same sense. She, in fact, our medic really ended up sticking up for her a lot and tried to act as a surrogate for what she wanted to do. And she sort of just let herself be led around the rest of the time. But I think she was actually the most shattered of the group.
Yeah.
But didn't show it.
Which, if you want to go, like, super hardcore, like, dig into it, like, you can almost be like, it's representation of people that suffer abuse and how they end up just fading into the background.
You're digging.
Mechanism or...
You're digging. I like it. No, I hear that for sure. And, but you got to look at some of their causes, too. Everyone, the whole team has their reasons for being here,
Yes.
I think there's a lot of the one I was interested in that fell a little flat for me was the psychologist centrist. She's sort of an enigma starting off. She's very distant. She doesn't answer a lot of Lena's questions. She is very standoffish. But you find out her thing is she has cancer and she wants the chance to see this mission out, this trip of a lifetime. Before she actually dies. She knows I'm dying anyway. There's nothing else behind it. So. I was expecting, I guess, some other type of revelation or something else from her, but that didn't really come to be. That's okay, but that just sort of was something that fell a little flat.
Yeah, I feel that. What they could have done with that, though, was, like, I was just thinking about that, with, like, the mutation and, like, the cancer mutation. What they could have done with that could have been so insane. And I thought
right?
they could have done that, but
right? Man, because, you see, you hit on something key. This whole time, they're talking about, comparing these mutations to tumors, to, unnatural growths, to things that tumors force cells to do, force the body to do, to grow in irregular and weird ways. And we see this down to the cellular level. Lena, the whole trip, she's constantly examining not just the blood samples and the tissue samples she's taking as they go on, but herself as well. And sure enough, she finds out, heading on through the film, that she is infected with this prismatic effect too. It's called the Shimmer. She sees her very cells start to change under a microscope, and it freaks her out. She doesn't know what's going to become of her, if anything. But no, I agree. This is a place where I think you could have seen something like cancer just speed up and just erupt into something nuts. But now now I'll play devil's advocate on that, because now you got me thinking about the light tower. And when we reach the light tower, which is the source, which is the whole point of what they're after in this film, Lena manages to find a recording of her husband. She finds everything that happens, and he basically on video records himself saying, I'm losing my mind. I can't hold on to this anymore. And he is not known who he's talking to at the moment, but he begs whoever it is in the foreground, if you get out of here, find my wife, find Lena. And he kills himself with a grenade. Then we see a clone of him step into frame and some other really weird images. So you're instantly freaked out. Lena delves a little further, and she finds herself smack dab in the middle of the source. Sure enough, the Professor Centris, psychologist, she's already there in the middle of this thing. It looks like she's, on her last moments or whatever here. And I think there's a couple key things with this scene. First of all, it's wild. She pretty much, instead of a straight up biological mutation, she just erupts into light that folds back on itself and looks like creates almost like a weird wormhole of sorts, which is a sick, cool effect. But I don't know. I don't know if that's a result of the whole idea of the crazy cancer mutation or the malignant issue. True. or just where she's at. Because see, here's what's freaky on that footage we saw. Kane had come across the same place. He'd run across the same experience. Something happened down there, and I want to say it's part of that source, whatever that was, that turns beings into pure light. But we're given this really weird, crazy scene where a speck of Lena's blood gets in this thing, and instantly it starts replicating and creates pretty much an outline of her. And it's this mimic that it is attempting to mimic everything about her form and everything else, to completely copy her. And I saw some of the critical reception of this. So people questioned that. They said, "Oh man, this is sort of feels like a mind time thing. Is this the last main alien that we're actually dealing with?" And recover this. They felt it's kind of underwhelming. I really didn't have as much problem with that. It was freaky more than anything. But what did you think of that scene, about how all that played out?
Well, I've just through a lot of stuff I've been reading and just hearing is this really connects with Ex Machina a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Because that was wasn't that the one that was worked on right before this film?
I believe so. It also starred Oscar Isaac.
Sure enough.
And it was just kind of like that whole concept of something that's not real being real. I think he creates the AI that's very obvious it's a robot, and then it ends up becoming almost human-esque, and you can't tell that it's not. And I feel like that's almost what they were doing here. It's and then maybe, again, probably looking way too much into this, but our society has a fear of something not being real, whether it's our news, our friends, our family, and it's portraying itself as something else when we think it is something. Does that make sense?
No, I hear you. You just dug into that one in a way that I didn't even go into, man. No. I hear you.
So as long as my statement's making sense, but that was kind of my take on it. It's
neat. Neat. Ultimately, the center of this singularity. Now, I want to highlight this. I think this is the main strength of the film in terms of direction. We talked a bit about the visuals, natural, unnatural. The formation of this room, what's the source of the phenomenon, what's causing the shimmer, supposedly. The whole thing was built off of something mathematical, which is called a Mandelbrot set. And basically, this is they're fractals, and it's a set of computer-generated fractals, which ends up causing, as they expand, an explosion, which create an image. So what's interesting about that is when you let the set generate, it sort of creates an image of a berry. But if you go beyond that, if you keep expanding that outwards, there's just this void that's left behind. And what's sick is that void of that equation is what they used visually for this room. So the room itself is like this liquid dark metal almost, and it's this really freaky, almost looks like a hive of some sort, you know, but it's not. It's living, but it's not. It's metallic, but it's organic. And the whole the shape of it and the formation is really cool. I had no idea.
It's almost black hole-esque.
It is.
Way. Like it's sucking everything.
It is. It is. Design-wise, and especially after looking into how, what was their inspiration for this, and using this kind of equation, like using a number set to build a scene, that's brilliant. I thought that was very well executed, and I really haven't seen that type of inspiration or something like that done yet in a quite like this sci-fi. So that's just flat out cool.
Yeah, I agree.
We finally, with as Lena invariably being the last one last surviving member, she does manage to take this thing out. She finds another grenade, manages to take out the pin in the hands of the clone she's dealing with, and just gets away, jumps out. Turns out the lighthouse itself burns down, and supposedly she stops it. Supposedly that's it. She manages to collapse in the phenomenon. And now we sort of jump back into present time, which we've been darting in and out the whole movie. She's being interrogated / interviewed by a guy in a hazmat suit. These are my biggest problems where I ran into. I think we got this solid build, this solid exploration throughout, and when we sort of reach the end here, there's so much I don't know. When she's questioned about it, they say, "Well, you obviously found something alien. What did it want?" And Lena's response is, "I don't think it wanted anything." And there's so much of an I don't know here. I really started to question that, because this is the moment where you sort of tie things together and bring it in. Arrival did this, at the end of the film. Johnny Mnemonic. I can keep going back through other different types of Odyssey films that manage to tie something, to anchor this, to structure it down. But this is my issue with this film. Ultimately, it's just sort of, I feel it just kind of floats at this point. It feels we get this far and we just don't have really much underlying structure or content to root it. Lena comes to the realization that the man who's in the recovery unit is not her husband. She finds the truth. She knows that it's a replicated clone of her husband in the end. It's revealed we know she still has the Shimmer inside of her. There's this sort of weird twist. I'll get my own interpretation of that, but I mean, how'd you handle that, man? I mean, do you think what we got there and with some of these end scenes that's enough to tie this thing down to make a larger point, or not? I mean, there's two ways, I guess. A couple ways you can interpret it. It's like, one, they're setting up for a trilogy, which I don't think is going to happen. I doubt it. I think they wanted this to be one film and that's it. Right.
But it's possible. You never know. Sometimes if something makes enough money, they'll crank out another one just cause. Right. But because right now the budget was a 55. So no, it was $55 million budget gross. Right. It's been doing okay at the box office right now. Yeah. But mostly been overshadowed by Black Panther. Of course. Obviously, but they're gonna make a ton of money off of Netflix. So probably by the time, and it hasn't hit China yet. Once it hits China, it'll balloon, obviously. Right. But so I mean that's one theory. Another theory is I don't know. Like, part of me was like kind of okay with it because I feel like that's the way the whole film has been. It would only make sense for there to be no anchor. Right. And like in a way, it's almost kind of like real life-esque. Right. Like it's like something happens and you just got to figure out how to live on after it happens, Right. Like obviously this is a terrible experience for Lena and for her group, and just kind of living with the consequences of it. So but then again, it's like, man, I want a couple answers. I mean, these guys having the Shimmer in, how's that going to affect the rest of the world? You're telling me this is never going to happen again. What happens to everything that was inside the Shimmer? Like, is that just gone now?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, that was really, I don't know. So I didn't. It wasn't my favorite film.
Right.
It had some stuff there.
It did. I want to say it had the chance to make a bigger footprint. It didn't all have to be at the end, but in sort of, bringing some of those themes that they set, and this idea of replication, refraction. I mean, that came all the way down to the design element. It's all the way throughout this movie. I think that's great. And maybe that's something that could have been elaborated upon. One thing I did get out of it for the end that I thought I found interesting. It almost seems sort of like a perverted twist or a different look at Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. You arguably have the last two remaining Shimmers here. You have the replicant of Lena's husband, Cain, who is basically a walking alien in of himself, and then you have Lena, who her fate's unknown. We know her body was starting to change. We know she has the Shimmer inside of her. That's very clearly revealed in the final scene, in case you were wondering, with the way her eyes turn multicolored almost. But I thought that idea of creating something new, annihilating something to destroy it, starting over, maybe these two represent this new Genesis point. I don't know. But I saw that last scene through that lens. So.
And, I find it very interesting that there's been quite a few films that have come out probably in the past 2 years, I'd even argue.
Yeah.
What kind of the whole Genesis story. This one, there was an argument that Mother was supposed to be a dark twist on the Genesis story. There was, the whole Alien franchise ever since Ridley Scott took over.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's just a very interesting trend right now, and I'm kind of curious to see. I don't know why. I'm not really sure why. I don't know. I don't think enough questions been asked, but I think people just find it fascinating, the origins, perhaps. I don't know.
Cool. But there it is. In a nutshell. So, all right. If we're looking at this, everything we just gone over as a whole, how many refractions out of 10 would you give this one?
How many refractions?
we always try to come out with some kind of stupid unit of measurement, like based off.
That was a good one. I appreciate it.
Oh man!
Oh man! The ending really kind of took it down for me.
Yeah.
I think that lost it some points. But in terms of, I don't know. Oh man, that's a tough, man. Like I think because it brought up a lot of great questions about God making mistakes and how there's the argument that he didn't. He doesn't make, and then the whole we don't commit suicide, but we commit self-destruction. Like that was great.
That was poignant. Yeah.
And just I think it'd be fair to say 7.5 to 8 refractions. Fair
enough. It sounds like you're leaning more towards that 7.5 zone. Me.
More 7.5.
Fair enough.
I'm not a sci-fi fan either, but it was enough to make me go, that was good.
All right. Cool. I'm mostly in the same camp. I give this a solid 7 refractions out of 10. Mostly as you just pointed out on ending and stuff like that. If you're really into sci-fi, I'd recommend going to check this out. As far as what we have, just if you look at the whole pool of movies that are out right now. Otherwise, if you're just my opinion, if you're not bleeding for sci-fi watch, I think you can catch this one on Blu-ray or DVD. Now, I do want to point real quick to something important about the release of this one. The distribution of this, so we've got the big screen here in, I think, China, right?
Yes, China and North America.
China and North America, we get the main big screen releases. However, everywhere else, internationally, this is going straight to Netflix, which is kind of weird.
I feel like that might end up becoming the new trend.
Could be.
Just because you reach such a broad audience so fast, you get paid up front. Like, you don't have to wait for your, every time someone buys a DVD, you just get paid for however many years you decide to put it on Netflix. Yeah. So it's just cash, like straight cash, and I don't know. Like, that I feel like this could be the new trend, especially since Netflix has started making its own films, and Hollywood obviously wants to compete with that.
Right.
I think we could. I think it wouldn't surprise me if in the next 2 to 5 years you're going to start seeing a lot more films do this.
And that's a double edge, I mean, on the one hand, you design something for big screen, and then you try to translate that to the small screen or like to stream service and Netflix. Garland himself has been on the record stating his satisfaction and frustration. Like you said, I think he's happy with the distribution aspect of it, that you can reach so many more people quicker. But in the same hand, he said, well, there's probably shots I would have done differently. There's different ways we would have filmed certain scenes had we known we were, trying to get optimized for, streaming or that. Yeah, so creatively, I think there's a little bit lost in that. And this whole distribution thing, I think you are going to see more and more of it. I'm hoping though that as we do, that that one or the other's picked. Either it's specifically for big screen or specifically for Netflix. That's just my hope. So,
yeah, I can agree with that.
Cool.
I mean, just one last thing. I guess I would like to bring up. I don't know how much more you have.
Yeah.
Is how do you feel? What do you think this sci-fi film does? I think you saw in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, you saw a huge wave of fantasy films. In the late 2000s, up to I'd say about 3 years ago, there's a ton of superhero and franchises.
Yeah.
The past couple years have been a lot of true stories have been coming out, like Patriots Day, Darkest Hour, Snowden.
Right.
Do you think we're going to see a return to sci-fi films?
I'm not feeling it yet. I don't think this is the film that brings us to the Sci-Fi Renaissance. I think this is a solid enough entry that is worth checking out for any fan. But right now, we're so much in the age of, besides superhero movies and remakes and, at different types of action films, that it's interesting for sci-fi. I don't think it's the death of it, and I don't think this represents the renaissance of it. It really feels to me sci-fi is sort of just coasting along on a nice kind of even track right now. I'm a fan myself, and it feels like it's not hated. At the same hand, it's not the biggest thing on people's demand. I think there's always going to be a place for it, but I don't think this is the movie that brings it to a new era.
Do you think that we're going to see more of a return of movies based on books then?
That's a good question. It depends, I think, on the reception of the book. The fun about the book is you get that comparison chance. It's something that's established. It's something that's out there. So then people can go and get engaged with that beyond the film. That's a good thing. As far as that type of movement, will we see that? I think for our slice of life, for sci-fi, and even for some horrors in a way, definitely I could see that. For some reason, I think there's some grounding, some foundation that the book offers, either like an entry, a sci-fi, or an action flick, or something like that. I even think back to Dark Tower, which is pseudo sci-fi in and of itself. I mean, that's very much a book based, and we're seeing this more and more. So for sci-fi specifically, yeah, I think we can see it a lot. And
also, I mean, there's a new Peter Jackson film that's coming out that's based on the books.
Yeah,
I want to make sure I get it right. It's the punk. What do they call that?
Punk. You got me there.
You know what oh man, what is it? I'll look it up.
Go ahead. I didn't know he had anything else.
Mortal Engines is coming out.
There you
which
go.
Is the new. It's the City on Wheels. It's kind of like sci-fi-esque, but it's like it's something punk where you lose your arm and it's like you're half cyborg, half metal. Oh, I forget that.
I feel salty about that.
Why am I not? Steampunk. That's what it is.
Steampunk.
Oh my gosh.
Here I am thinking you're talking about some kind of prank, like getting punked. I'm like, man, who punks somebody and like take their arm or something? Like, you're into some weird stuff, man.
No, it's a big steampunk film.
Gotcha.
As well.
Gotcha.
And it's based on book. And for me, like, one thing I do hope is, especially when it comes to movies with books, for me,
right.
Love reading, love books, and like I was always disappointed usually by the representation. But with this guy, I mean, with the author and the director working so closely together, I mean, hopefully we kind of see that with more books to film.
Yeah.
And like, apparently they were both very pleased,
Yeah.
Garland and then the author, and yeah.
Good deal. No, good deal. I'm hoping so too. I think there's still a future in that. So, all right. That is going to bring us to the end of our review. Here, be sure to hey, toss us a comment. What are your thoughts? Do you think this one fell flat at all? Was the ending enough for you, or whatever else? Or maybe it is, maybe it's not. Hey, we'd love to hear from you. But thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to stay locked in right here for more reviews. Also, with our Road to Infinity War content coming up and more of our regular shows. But till then, till next time, thank you so much, and we'll catch you later. Hey people, thank you for tuning into this episode and taking a listen. If you like our content, if you like what you're listening to, or anything we go over, hey, please, we would not only love to hear more from you, but it'd be great if you could throw some support. You can subscribe right below. Also, you can toss us a line anytime. That's ksongmedia@gmail.com. Of course, you can tune in for our channel anytime for movie reviews, game reviews, a lot of random wacky stuff. Who knows what you'll hear. And of course, our episode each week where we're bringing the nerdiest things we can find, dig up, and maybe not find. Maybe the stuff that just drops in our laps. But anyway, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope to hear from you again later. Take care.